Pain is not the enemy, it's the signal. Every story worth living begins with discomfort, with a fracture in the fabric of the world you thought you understood. Sometimes it arrives as heartbreak, sometimes as loss. Sometimes it's just the quiet ache of knowing that the life you're living doesn't reflect who you really are. But whatever form it takes, pain has a singular role to break through the noise and force you to pay attention. We're taught from a young age to avoid it, to label it as weakness, to run from it, drown it in distractions, bury it under work, entertainment, noise. We build our lives around escape strategies, anything to avoid being still. Long enough to hear what that pain is really trying to say. But here's the truth. What you refuse to feel will eventually shape you anyway. Only instead of shaping you through conscious transformation, it will shape you through silent erosion. Pain doesn't grow weaker when ignored. It grows louder. Left unacknowledged, it festers, it mutates. And when it finally explodes, it doesn't just hurt, it shatters. Not because you're weak, but because you've delayed the necessary confrontation for too long. That's how most people break, not from pain itself, but from their refusal to face it. Ellie. But if you choose to stop running, something changes. If you lean in, if you sit in the silence and let yourself truly feel, pain becomes something else entirely. It becomes a teacher, a mirror, a guide, and more than anything, it becomes a truth teller. It doesn't care about the version of you show to the world. It goes deeper than image. It exposes the cracks. It shows you where you've settled, where you've lied to yourself, where you've abandoned your own values for comfort or approval. It asks, not with cruelty, but with clarity, is this really who you want to be? Every meaningful transformation begins at that point, where the pain becomes too loud to ignore, and the old life becomes too small to contain who you're meant to become. You don't grow when things are perfect. You grow when something inside you says, I can't do this anymore. Not like this. That breaking point isn't the end. It's the doorway. It's the point where illusion is stripped away, and all that's left is the raw, terrifying possibility of who you could become. Only psychologically, pain is not just a reaction to injury, it's a call to meaning. Viktor Frankl understood this deeply. He wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. That's not a poetic ideal, it's an existential truth. When you understand why it hurts, when you locate the lesson inside the suffering, the pain becomes bearable. It becomes purposeful, it becomes full, but this is where most people get stuck. They want change without confrontation. They want transformation without sacrifice. But there is no rising without falling. There is no new identity without the death of the old one. Growth demands that you face the darkness within, the fear, the failure, the insecurity, and walk through it anyway. Pain is the crucible in which character is forged, and only those who dare to step into it willingly ever discover the strength they truly hold. So when it hurts, don't run, don't medicate it away. Don't bury it under fake smiles and polished words. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants, what it's showing you, what part of your life is no longer aligned, what truth you've been avoiding. Inside that discomfort is often the clearest message you'll ever receive. Ellie? Because the ones who rise, truly rise, aren't the ones who avoid suffering. They're the ones who transform it. They take what broke them and turn it into a foundation. They don't just survive the pain, they listen to it. They learn from it. And eventually, they use it. If you can learn to stop fearing pain and start respecting it, you'll find that it's not your enemy, it's your evolution. So the next time it hurts, ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Then listen closely, because that's the moment the HFV story begins. Not in perfection, but in pain. Not in triumph, but in truth. And if you answer that call, if you refuse to let pain define you, and instead let it refine you, you won't just heal, you'll rise to face it. Circumstances, not your past, but your response. At every point in your life, whether you see it clearly or not, You're standing between two choices, and they're not always loud, dramatic, or obvious. Most of the time, they're quiet, subtle. They don't announce themselves with flashing signs, but they are always there. You're either moving forward or retreating, while you're stagnating, becoming someone stronger, clearer, more aligned, or slipping into the comfort of avoidance and the slow decay of unrealized potential. Now, this is a difficult truth because it removes the illusion that circumstance control us. It places the weight of responsibility squarely where it belongs, on us, not on luck, not on upbringing, not on the system, on you. That's not to say those things don't shape your starting point. They absolutely do. Some people begin life carrying more pain, more trauma, more limitations. But choice, real choice, is not about where you start. It's about how you respond to where you are. And no matter how unfair your situation, you still have a say in how you carry it, what it turns you into, and whether you let it define you. One of the most destructive beliefs you can hold is that you have no power, that life happens to you and you're just a passenger. That mindset is not only false, it's dangerous because it leads to passivity. And passivity breeds resentment. And over time, resentment rots the soul. When you feel like you're always at the mercy of forces you can't control, you become bitter, cynical, numb. You stop showing up. You stop trying. You stop choosing. And that right there is the death of agency. But there is another path, a difficult one that demands attention, discipline, and brutal honesty. It starts with acknowledging that every moment holds a decision. Will I tell the truth or protect my pride, take responsibility or blame others? Will I show up even when I'm afraid, or will I shrink and wait for life to get easier? These choices seem small in the moment, but they compound. They become your life. And one day, you wake up and realize that who you are is nothing, no tot, more than the sum of the choices you've made consistently, especially when it was hard. This is what separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. Not talent, not intelligence, but the willingness to take ownership of their response to life's trials, the courage to act, even when they're uncertain, the refusal to let fear dictate their path. Every single person you admire has made this choice over and over again. Not just once, not just when it was convenient, but daily, in the dark, when no one was clapping for them. Psychologically speaking, this is central to personal development. The moment you recognize that you always have a choice, even if it's just a choice in how you interpret what's happening, you reclaim your power. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That is not just a philosophical statement, it's a psychological fact. It's how people survive tragedy. It's how they find strength and weakness. And it's how they eventually change the course of their lives. So ask yourself, what are the two choices in front of you right now? Maybe it's between honesty and avoidance. Maybe it's between action and procrastination. Maybe it's simply between giving up and holding on for one more day. Don't underestimate the weight of those decisions. The path you walk tomorrow starts with the choice you make today. No one else can make it for you, and no one else will live with the consequences but you. In the end, your life won't be defined by what happened to you. It will be defined by what you chose to do about it. So choose wisely and then choose again, because every moment is a crossroads. Every moment is a test, and the story you become begins with the decision you make right now. People don't break from pain alone. They break from pain that feels meaningless. That's why you must anchor your suffering to something higher, a vision, a dream, a mission, a loved one. HFV means hope in the middle of chaos, faith in the unseen, and victory not because you didn't fall, but because you refuse to stay down. When you assign meaning to your fight, you turn wounds into wisdom and scars into strength. Human beings don't just suffer. We interpret our suffering. That's the difference between breaking and enduring. It's not about the size of the pain. It's about the presence or absence of meaning. When suffering feels random, but when it has a purpose, when it becomes part of a larger story, it transforms, it sharpens, it clarifies. And that's not some poetic idea, that's psychological reality. Meaning is what allows human beings to carry burdens that would otherwise crush them. This is a truth people often forget in their search for happiness. They believe the goal is to eliminate all discomfort, to engineer a life that's smooth, safe, predictable. But that's not the path to strength. That's the path to numbness. Happiness without meaning is shallow. It's fleeting. It's not strong enough to hold you when the storms come, and the storms will come. What keeps a person grounded in chaos, what allows them to hold their integrity in the middle of pain, is the deep belief that their suffering is not in vain, that it matters, that it is doing something, building something within them. And this is where we must understand something critical. You don't get to choose whether or not life will be hard. That's guaranteed. What you do get to choose is whether or not that difficulty will be meaningless. Will you let the pain define you in bitterness and regret? Or will you give it direction, interpret it as a test, a lesson, a form of preparation for something greater? Viktor Frankl, who endured the unthinkable in concentration camps, wrote that the ones who survived weren't the physically strongest. They were the ones who could find a reason to keep going, a why, as he put it, because when you have a reason, you can tolerate almost anyhow. He was speaking not just as a survivor, but as a psychiatrist. He knew the mind's capacity to turn even the most brutal suffering into a source of clarity and transformation if the person could attach meaning to it. And that's what we must do in our own lives. When you go through betrayal, failure, loss, don't just ask, why me? That question spirals into victimhood. Instead ask, what is this trying to make of me? That question leads somewhere. It transforms confusion into purpose. It converts setbacks into structure. Because meaning is the architecture of resilience. It's the framework that gives pain its shape. Without it, you're just bleeding. With it, you're building. This is where faith, not in a religious sense necessarily, but in a deeply existential one, becomes necessary. You have to believe that what you are going through is not just suffering for the sake of suffering, but part of a refining process. A sacred fire that, yes, burns, but also reveals. Meaning allows you to frame your hardship as necessary, not fair, not pleasant, but necessary for growth, for understanding, for becoming someone you respect when you're alone with yourself. There's no formula for finding that meaning. It's personal. Sometimes it's connected to a mission. Sometimes it's for someone you love. Sometimes it's just the belief that your perseverance itself might inspire someone else not to give up. And sometimes that's enough. But the search for meaning in pain must be intentional. You have to look for it. You have to wrestle with it. You have to choose to believe that your life is not random, even when it feels like it is. And when you do, when you give your pain a reason, you stop being a victim of your suffering and start becoming the author of your life. So don't waste your pain. Don't hide from it. Use it. Give it meaning. Let it forge in you a depth that ease never could. Let it teach you what comfort never will. Because once you understand that pain can serve a purpose, you stop running from it and you start rising through it. Greatness never grows in comfort. Diamonds don't form without pressure, and warriors aren't born, they're forged. You must accept that your path will not be soft, but it will be sacred. The HFB story doesn't promise ease. It promises elevation. You weren't made to live small, stay hidden, or play safe. You were made to fight for something greater than yourself. Your strength is not in how you shine when it's easy, but how you rise when it hurts. There's a strange paradox in human nature that often gets overlooked. We desperately want to change our lives, but we resist changing ourselves. We want new outcomes without new actions, new results without new responsibilities. But real transformation, deep internal transformation, only happens when we confront the hard truth that change doesn't begin with the world bending in our favor. It begins with us becoming someone worthy of what we seek. People often say they're waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right conditions. But underneath that language is usually fear. Fear of failure, Fear of judgment. Fear of discovering they're not who they thought they were. And that fear keeps them stagnant, stuck in a cycle of potential without progress. The reality is, you don't need the right conditions. You need the right decision. A decision to evolve, a decision to take responsibility, not for what's happened to you, but for what you do next. This isn't self-help fluff. It's psychological necessity. The human mind is shaped not by what it wishes for, but by what it works for. Identity is not fixed, it's forged. Every choice you make is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. And if you avoid that responsibility, if you coast on habits that no longer serve you, if you blame everyone else for your stagnation, then your life becomes a prison you built yourself. But when you start to take responsibility, something remarkable happens. You stop negotiating with your limitations. You stop explaining away your weakness. And instead, you start identifying with your potential. You begin to act not out of emotion, but out of intention. And that changes everything. You stop asking, what do I feel like doing today? And start asking, who do I want to be, regardless of how I feel? That's the pivot. That's when discipline enters. That's when character begins to form. And yes, it's hard. Change is always painful because it requires death before rebirth. The death of old patterns, the death of self-pity, the death of the comfort that comes from saying, I can't help it. This is just who I am. But that comfort is counterfeit. It's cheap. It's the kind of peace that numbs you today, but poisons your tomorrow. And eventually, you wake up angry, not at the world, but at yourself for playing small for so long. You cannot evolve without discomfort. You cannot become resilient without resistance. Think about it. Muscles don't grow without tension. Minds don't sharpen without challenge. Souls don't deepen without suffering. That's not cruelty, that's design. And if you lean into that discomfort, if you choose to embrace the growth instead of resenting the pain, you become someone formidable, not just successful, not just impressive, but anchored. You stop being reactive and start being reliable. You develop a sense of internal authority, a trust in your own capacity to carry weight, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And that's what the world needs. Not more noise, not more performance, but more people with depth, with integrity, with quiet, unshakable strength that comes from having done the hard work of transformation alone when no one was watching. That kind of change isn't glamorous. It doesn't show up in highlight reels, but it shows up when it matters, when life breaks open. And only those who've built themselves from the inside out are left standing. So if you're waiting for something outside you to change, stop. Look inward. Ask yourself what kind of person you'd have to become to live the life you say you want. And then start becoming that person, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. That's where freedom begins. Not an escape, but an evolution, because in the end, no one's coming to save you. But if you're willing to do the inner work, if you're willing to die to who you were and fight for who you could be, you just might save yourself. You are not a mistake. Your pain was not random. Your survival wasn't just for you. There's someone out there who needs your story, raw, honest, broken, and redeemed. But to share it, you must stop being ashamed of it. Own your scars. Speak your truth. That is how HFV becomes more than your story. It becomes a movement. One soul at a time. One voice at a time. One light in the dark that tells others you're not alone. Let me tell you something about stories. Real stories. Not the kind you scroll past or the ones people polish to impress others, but the ones etched into the soul by hardship, failure, and survival. The kind of story you carry, often hidden behind a quiet smile or a tired sigh, or that ache in your chest you don't talk about. Most people never truly own their story. They either run from it or bury it beneath shame, pretending it never happened. But here's the truth. Your story, the full, unedited version, is your greatest source of power. And it's not because it's perfect. It's powerful because it's not. You see, we live in a world obsessed with image, constantly selling us the illusion that we're only valuable when we're flawless, when our past is neat and our path is linear. But life doesn't work that way. Growth is jagged. It's painful. It comes in moments when everything collapses, and you think it might not be worth getting back up. But when you do get up, when you choose to rise, you don't just survive. You become someone other people can believe in. That's where real impact starts. There's something fundamentally human, psychologically necessary, even about turning chaos into order by telling the truth about what happened to you. Not the convenient version, the real one, and not for pity, for purpose. Because someone, somewhere, is living a nightmare you've already crawled out of. And they need more than advice. They need evidence that survival is possible. Your life can be that evidence, but only if you stop hiding the scars you work so hard to heal. What most people don't realize is that owning your story is an act of courage. It means facing the parts of yourself you'd rather forget. The failure, the betrayal, the years of silence, the shame. It means looking directly at the moments that broke you and saying, yes, that happened, and it shaped me, but it didn't finish me. And when you do that, when you stand tall in the truth of your own journey, you become a lighthouse. You become the proof that pain can be transformed. You give permission to others to stop pretending, to drop the mask, to speak with honesty. That's how healing spreads. Not through perfection, but through authenticity. Philosophically, this touches something ancient and sacred. In mythology, the hero is never the one who avoids darkness. It's the one who walks into it and brings something back. Insight, strength, a lesson. That's your responsibility. Not just to suffer, but to make your suffering mean something. And the way you do that is by turning it into a story that serves others. Not everyone will understand. That's fine. Some people are still running from their own truth. But the ones who need you, who truly need you, they'll hear it. They'll feel it. And maybe, because of you, they'll decide not to give up. Maybe they'll begin to write their own story with a different ending. So if you're holding back, waiting for some perfect version of your life before you speak, stop. If you're hiding because you think your wounds make you weak, stop. Your pain was real. Your healing is real. And your voice matters because it's been through the fire and come out the other side. You are not broken. You are becoming, and your story, honest, raw, and unfinished, is exactly what this world needs more of. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you'll ever say is simply, this Zick world, I went through it. And I'm still here, and someone out there will hear that and choose to stay